If you are planning a trip to Grand Canyon National Park, look no further because today I am going to walk you through the trip planning process from beginning to end, adding lots of good tips and tricks along the way. So let's jump into it. My name is Ash. I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I spend a lot of time at the Grand Canyon. It's one of my favorite national parks. It's fantastic for hiking, and so you'll find me there quite often, checking out the trails, hitting some new ones, doing my favorite ones that I do over and over again, and exploring the viewpoints. So I am just really excited to walk you through the trip planning process today for your trip to Grand Canyon National Park. This will be a pretty long video, but you will have everything that you need to know by the end of this so that you can get your Grand Canyon National Park trip planned without any hassle. Let's dive in with an overview of the park because this park can be a little bit more complicated than other national parks. It's a very large national park. It has about 1.2 million acres. It covers both the north and the south rims of the Grand Canyon. So there are other rims. You've got the East Rim, which is like the Lee's Ferry area, the area near Page, Arizona. And you've got the West Rim, which is closer to Vegas. A lot of people go there from Vegas, and that is run by the Native American tribe out there. So, and then you've got like Havasupai is really popular part of the Grand Canyon. That also is run by Native American tribes, not the National Park Service. So today I am covering the north and south rims, which are the main parts of the Grand Canyon. When people say they're going to the Grand Canyon, usually that's what they're referring to, but a lot of people just don't realize that that's what the national park itself covers. It's the north and the south rims. Looking at a map, so the Grand Canyon is found in the northwestern corner of Arizona. So the Grand Canyon is this pink area here. This is the national park itself. And as I mentioned, you've got some other areas, like this is where the Havasupai stuff is. This is the West Rim. This is the East Rim up here. So this is the actual national park here. You've got the Utah border right here. So we've got Utah right here, Zion National Park. You've got Las Vegas over here, the Nevada border. So it is really close to a couple of other states, being in the northwestern corner of Arizona. Grand Canyon National Park was established in 1919. This was one of the first national parks. I think it was number 10 or 11, somewhere in there. So it has been a national park for a very long time. It also sees some of the highest visitation numbers of any national park. So usually the Grand Canyon hovers around 4 to 5 million visitors per year, which is extremely high. A lot of those visitors just come to the canyon, look out at it, and then leave. That is what I'm trying to dissuade you from doing in this video because there is so much you can do here beyond just looking at the canyon from the rim. So we'll talk about that, but just know it does have an extremely high visitation and it can get really crowded. Everything I'm going to talk about going forward in this video will depend on which rim you are hoping to visit when you go to Grand Canyon National Park. So as I mentioned, there is a north rim and a south rim, and this is really the age-old question. Which one is better? Which one should I visit? South rim versus north rim? Let me talk you through it. So looking at this map again, you'll notice this is the north rim here. And then where it says Grand Canyon Village down here, that is the south rim. And it's all separated by the beautiful Colorado River, which goes through the canyon. So you cannot easily drive from the north rim to the south rim. You can hike. There are trails that take you down to the bottom and then back up to the top. Or you could do some type of flight seeing or something like that if you want to see both sides. Or what pretty much everybody else does is they have to drive. And so if you're driving from the north rim to the south rim, you've got to come up and around, over and in. So it does take a long time. It's about a 4-hour drive between the two rims. And truthfully, these two rims couldn't be more different. It's a completely different experience, one over the other. So let's start with talking about the South Rim, because the South Rim is the most popular part of Grand Canyon National Park. It's the most popular place to go to see the Grand Canyon, and this is the side of the park that gets the most visitation. So if you go to the South Rim, then you will just find a lot of amenities. There's a bunch of hotels, a bunch of restaurants. You've got some really great hiking trails. You've got a shuttle system that you need to learn how to navigate. Some of those shuttles are required. They're not optional, so that makes a difference. You've got a lot of viewpoints and more roads kind of spanning the length of the canyon right there. So your viewpoints can vary greatly depending on which one you're at. So the South Rim has the most popular trails. It has the South Kaibab Trail. It has the Bright Angel Trail. Those are trails that most people use to take down to get to the bottom of the canyon. And then again, just a lot more amenities and a lot more people. The North Rim is much quieter. It only sees about 10% of the total visitation of people that go to Grand Canyon National Park. There's not a whole lot there. You've got a lodge with a couple of little restaurants, and that's, there's a campground and like a camp store. That's about it. It's really quiet. There's less to do here. And so there are some hiking trails. You've got the North Kaibab Trail, which also dips down into the canyon. And then you've got a scenic drive. And those really are the main things to do on the North Rim. The cool thing about the North Rim is that it's about 1,000 feet higher in elevation than the South Rim. And so you get a more forested area. There's a lot of different kinds of plants than you'll see on the South Rim, a lot of bigger trees, more heavy forests. And so the landscape here is totally different. You will not feel like you're seeing the same thing if you go to both rims. They're both vastly different. So then to answer the question, which rim should you go to? The answer obviously is both if you have time. I highly recommend visiting both. And you can see both rims really thoroughly in about 4 to 5 days, which is what I recommend. I would absolutely spend that time at the Grand Canyon. It is totally worth it. But if you need to choose one or the other, because again, they're separated by a 4-hour drive, so maybe that's just really not in your schedule, then I personally would recommend the South Rim first. I do think that the South Rim gives you a really great variety of activities, things to do for every member of your group. You'll see a lot of really cool viewpoints from here, and you can hike some really epic trails. As I mentioned before, though, the downside of the South Rim is that it does get a lot busier. It is much more developed. And so it can be hard to feel like you're in a really pristine, like solitary place and really feel the beauty of the nature that you're seeing. And so you definitely, if you are going to go to the South Rim, you definitely need to go with a good plan. Otherwise, you will really just feel like you're stuck in traffic, or you're waiting in shuttle lines, or you're just surrounded by people while you're there. So that's my caveat there. But if you've never been to the Grand Canyon, I would start with the South Rim. That being said, I love the North Rim. I love the way that it feels. I love how much quieter it is up there. I love how just so many fewer people are surrounding me when I'm there. You don't have to fight for parking nearly as much. It's not nearly as complicated. There's really a few different things that most people do when they're on the North Rim, but it's much more relaxed and much more solitary. So I do absolutely love the North Rim. I would not discount it. I just think it doesn't give you as many of those like really epic Grand Canyon experiences that you might be looking for as a first-time visitor. But again, if you can do both, you won't be sorry. It is really cool to see both sides. So once you decide which rim you want to go to, then it's time to decide what time is the best time to visit for your trip. Because depending on which rim you're going to will determine when you'll want to plan your trip. The South Rim stays open year-round, so you can visit the South Rim at any time of year. It does get snow in the winter, and so if you're planning on hiking or going in the winter or anything like that, you will want to plan for colder temperatures at the top of the canyon. You might need yak tracks or spikes to put on your shoes to get down into the canyon if you want to do that. And it does get a lot quieter in the off season, so that can be a nice time to go if you don't mind having some closures from snow and things like that. The North Rim is only open seasonally. It's open from about mid-May through October generally. They start shutting down their lodging services and things like that around mid-October-ish. And so you will want to keep that in mind as you're planning your trip there as well. The North Rim stays a lot colder than the South Rim. It gets a lot more snow, which is why those roads close during the winter, but it can be a really nice destination in like the middle of the summer when it's just so hot at the South Rim. The North Rim will be a little bit cooler, so that's a good option too. If you're looking for more guidance on this, go to dirtandmyshoes.com. I will link this article in the video description below. But this article walks you through month by month what to expect at the Grand Canyon, what will be open, what you'll be able to do, things that you'll want to know and look out for if you plan on going. I have it all listed out here. So that will also just really be helpful in helping you make the decision of when you want to plan your trip. And be aware that things are always changing in places like the Grand Canyon. Mother Nature does her work year-round. So if you want the latest updates and if you want me to pay attention to what's happening in the park and give you instructions based on what's open, what's not, when to catch the shuttle and when you don't need to, where to park, at what times, all of that you can find in my Grand Canyon itinerary, also at dirtandmyshoes.com. The next question then that you'll want to answer is how many days do you want to spend at the Grand Canyon? And as I mentioned before, if you're hoping to see both rims, you really should give yourself at least 4 days, 5 if you can, because you have to drive between the two rims and that takes a lot of time. And there's about, I would say, a day and a half to 2 days worth of things that you'll want to do on the North Rim. And you can easily keep yourself busy for 3 days on the South Rim. So that's where those 5 days just really come in handy if you want to hit everything really well, you want to fully experience the Grand Canyon. That's what I would recommend. Now, not everybody has 5 days. I understand that. And so if you can only go for 1 to 2 days, then I would pick a rim, either the North or the South Rim, and just enjoy your time there. Really dig in as deep as you can while you're there. For the South Rim, for me personally, I would not go for less than 2 days if you're really serious about experiencing the Grand Canyon to the fullest. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people just drive in, look at the canyon, stay for maybe a couple of hours, and then leave. That is pretty typical for the visitation at the Grand Canyon. But I am just encouraging you to give it more time because there are sections of the park that are a lot quieter, even on the South Rim. And there are some really cool experiences to be had in this park. So I would say if you're going to the South Rim, try to give yourself 2 days. 3 is better. If you're going to the North Rim, 1 day you can see a lot. 2 days is better. If you want to see both, 4 to 5 days. So you've decided which rim you want to visit, maybe both, and you've decided how many days you have. So now let's talk about where to stay. Let's start with the South Rim, and looking at the map of the South Rim, these are the maps that they give you at the Grand Canyon, and I have to say that I feel like they're pretty confusing if you haven't been to the Grand Canyon before, so I don't love them, but I'm going to try to talk you through this so that it makes more sense. But this is the South Rim here, and so most people, if they're coming in from Flagstaff or Williams or somewhere south of the South Rim, they'll come in on this highway here through Tusayan. And Tusayan is a small little town just right outside of the South Rim. It's a great jumping off point for the South Rim. So I would definitely consider staying there. The lodging options are a little bit more varied and a little bit more price friendly than they are actually at the Rim. And so Tusayan is a really good option actually for staying at the South Rim. On the other side of the park, so if you go out this road here, this is the Desert View Drive, and you go out this way, out the east entrance, then you'll hit the small town of Cameron, which also has a couple of options. I don't like staying out in that area as much just because it is a lot further from the main stuff that you're going to want to do in the South Rim. And so I typically don't stay out that way. If you're going to stay outside of the park, I would look in Tusayan first. I also don't really recommend staying in Flagstaff or Williams for visiting the South Rim. A lot of people will probably get mad at me for saying that, and a lot of people do stay in those places for seeing the Grand Canyon. But if you're serious about getting in there and seeing a lot of the Grand Canyon, and most importantly, not getting stuck in the traffic and the crowds, then if you're staying in Williams or Flagstaff and you're an hour, hour and a half outside of the national park from there, it's going to be really hard to avoid the crowding on the South Rim. So this is a time when I would absolutely maybe pay a little bit extra to stay in Tusayan or to stay on the Rim itself. So those are your options if you're staying outside of the park. Over here, this is the main Grand Canyon village of the park. And I can actually take it up to this map so you can see that better. And there are quite a few hotels in here. And so you've got some options. You've got the Market Plaza area, which has the Yavapai Lodge, and there's a ton of stuff to do right here. This is closer to the campground, so you've got the Mather Campground, you've got the Trailer Village, all of that is kind of in this Market Plaza area. And this is a really good location. You can see this blue track here that's going around Market Plaza. That is one of the park shuttles that you can take to connect you to everything else. So this area is great if you want to stay on the South Rim. You'll also typically find cheaper hotel prices over here than you will at the other ones. So that's a good, more budget-friendly option while still being super close to everything you'll want to do. Then coming over here, so this is the Grand Canyon Village area, which again is very similar to Market Plaza, where it has just a lot of stuff you can do and a lot of amenities. But you'll see, so there's we've got El Tovar, which is the main, it's so cool. It's such a cool hotel. It's one of the great examples of architecture in the National Park Service. And so that one's kind of the primo hotel there. You'll pay a premium price to stay there. But then you've got the Kachina Lodge, the Thunderbird Lodge, you've got the Bright Angel Lodge right there. So Maswick is kind of back off the rim over here. All of those, again, great options if you can get lodging there because, as you can see with these ones, you are right along the rim. All you have to do is step out and you can see the Grand Canyon. So it's pretty crazy. You will pay a premium price for these, but you couldn't ask for a better location. And I forgot to mention when I was talking about going out to Cameron and out the east entrance over here, there is a campground out in this area too. You've got the Desert View campground out here, and that is a fine option. I've camped there several times. Again, it's just a little bit further from most of the main stuff you're going to want to do over here. It takes about 45 minutes to drive this road. But you are in a beautiful location. You're right next to the Desert View Watchtower. You've got all these smaller viewpoints that are really cool. So it's by no means a bad decision to stay there. It's just you'll want to plan in some extra drive time to get yourself over to this area. Now let's talk about the North Rim if you've decided to go there. This one has very few options of places to stay, but I will talk you through a few of my favorites. Okay, so here's our map for the North Rim. Again, I just feel like it's a little bit hard to read, but I will walk you through it here. So as you're coming into the North Rim, you're coming in on this road here, and there's really not a lot to do out here. When you're driving in, it's like, well, where are we going? Where are we? And so as you're coming in though, the main place that you'll hit as you're coming out of Kanab, Utah and Page, Arizona, and you're kind of all funneling into this one road to get down to the Grand Canyon North Rim, is you'll hit a little It's kind of just like a truck stop with a hotel and a restaurant at Jacob Lake. And so Jacob Lake is an option. People do stay at the hotel at Jacob Lake to visit the North Rim. I would say that would be like my last choice because you are still about 45 minutes to an hour from all of this from Jacob Lake. And so it is much further out than I typically like to be. As you're driving in on this road, then you will hit, there's like the Demont Campground and the Kaibab Lodge. There are a couple of privately owned things that are right outside of the entrance to the North Rim. Those ones are better options. I would absolutely stay there because you're pretty close to all of this from there. So that doesn't bother me. I would look at those ones before I looked at Jacob Lake. But coming in, when you're finally coming into the park and you're coming down to the main area, so this is where you're going to find the amenities on the North Rim. So you do have a visitor center. It's a pretty small visitor center, but it's there. And then you have the Grand Canyon North Rim Lodge, which is right here on the edge of the canyon. It's really cool. It's a beautiful lodge. So that would be my top choice if you're wanting to stay in a hotel. If you're wanting to camp, there's a campground right by the lodge, not too far away from the rim there. So those are my top options for staying on the North Rim of the park. There's nothing out here, nowhere to stay. This is all just sightseeing for the day. There are kind of out in this area when you get into the Kaibab National Forest, which borders the national park right here. There are some options out here as far as camping. You can do some dispersed camping. There is Big Springs, which has some cabins you can rent, some really primitive cabins, stuff like that. So there are a few options. You've got the Toraweep, the Tuweep area, which is part of the national park on the North Rim. That's further out this way along the rim. So those are some options too. But if you're mostly just wanting to stay in this main part of the North Rim, then I would look at the Grand Canyon Lodge or campground first, and then kind of work your way backwards to the Demont Campground or the Kaibab Lodge here. And then if you can't find anything, maybe consider Jacob Lake. Now for the fun part. We talk about the best activities and things that you won't want to miss when you visit the Grand Canyon. Let's start with the South Rim, and this is where the South Rim truly shines because there is so many cool opportunities for you waiting at the South Rim of the Grand Canyon. My favorite thing to do on this side is to hike. I'm a hiker. That's why my website is called Dirt in My Shoes. And so I really feel like that's just the best way to see the Grand Canyon. You can stay at the rim, you can stay on top. There is a rim trail that goes for quite a while that will connect a bunch of viewpoints for you. And so if you're wanting a less traditional hike and something maybe a little bit easier and flatter, that's a great option. If you're wanting to hike a more traditional trail, if you're wanting to hike down into the canyon, then I highly, highly recommend it. Just make sure that you are prepared. The Grand Canyon trails are very strenuous. They drop down pretty quickly. It's very normal to feel like you're doing fine on the trail because you're going down. And then when you turn around to come up, it's just much more difficult than you anticipate. So you do have to be really careful on these trails. But my favorite trail at the Grand Canyon, hands down, is the South Kaibab Trail. I love that trail. It is steep. It does take you down quite quickly. But what's really cool about it is your vantage point changes so often along this trail. You don't have to go too far. You can go to Uwa Point, which is a really good turnaround if you are just wanting to see what the canyon looks like from below the rim. You can go to Cedar Ridge, which is about 3 miles round trip. It is still hard because you still got to hike back out, but that takes you out to a point that kind of juts out into the canyon. And so you get some really cool 360-degree views from there. And during the summer, that's where I would stop. It gets really, really hot at the Grand Canyon, especially once you start dipping below the rim. And so you will want to plan accordingly for that. The Bright Angel Trail is another really popular trail at the Grand Canyon South Rim. I don't like this trail as much as I like the South Kaibab Trail, but it still is a fun way to dip below the canyon rim real fast and just get a different vantage point. The canyon, to me, looks so much cooler once you get below the rim. So I highly recommend at least starting one of these trails for a minute just to get the scope, just to feel the magnificence of the erosive powers of the Colorado River and just how deep this canyon actually is. The other two things that I absolutely would not skip on the South Rim is first, taking the shuttle out to Hermit's Rest. This is a mandatory shuttle for most of the year, and so it will take you out to various shuttle stops, various viewpoints that you can see as you make your way out to Hermit's Rest. And those viewpoints are just super impressive and a really cool way to see the canyon. The other stop is the Desert View Drive, and this is something that I would not miss if you have more than one day at the South Rim. And this is a road that you drive yourself. It's a scenic drive with a bunch of viewpoints that you can stop at as well. So that's a really cool area of the park. The viewpoints on Desert View Drive look much different than the ones going out to Hermit's Rest, so it's pretty cool to see both directions. If you visit the North Rim, there are 4 things that I really love to do on this side of the park. And that is the Bright Angel Point Trail. That's a really cool one that takes you to a nice viewpoint. It's not very long. It doesn't take very long, but it's really a cool way to see the canyon. Imperial Point is the highest point in Grand Canyon National Park that you can go to. And so this one is a really cool vantage point into the Grand Canyon, and you are seeing it from a very high elevation, which is really cool. And then I really love driving out to the end of the scenic drive and going to see Cape Royal and the Angel's Window. The Angel's Window is an arch that goes out into the Grand Canyon, and you can walk on top of the arch, and it gives you major vertigo, which is really cool. So it's just a really neat way to see and again feel the expansiveness of the Grand Canyon. And lastly, on the North Rim, you've got the North Kaibab Trail, which is again one of those popular, famous corridor trails that takes you down to the bottom of the canyon. And so if you want to hike a portion of that, I highly recommend going to at least the Coco Nino Overlook. It's not very far, but it gives you a really great taste of what it's like to hike down into the canyon. I have another video on this channel about the 12 things you don't want to miss on your first visit to the Grand Canyon, where I talk about these things. I show you where they are on the map. I give you more information about each one. So be sure to check that out if you're wanting more information about the things you can do at the Grand Canyon. Let's talk a little bit about what a typical day at Grand Canyon National Park will look like for you, and maybe some of the things you'll want to think about before you go, things you might want to pack, stuff like that. I'll just give you a few tips and tricks from my many experiences in the Grand Canyon. So the first thing about the Grand Canyon is when you're looking at the Grand Canyon in the middle of the day, it can be a little bit washed out. It can be a little bit hard to see the different layers and to see the different colors in those layers. And so I absolutely would try to be there either at sunrise or sunset at least once or twice while you're there, just so that you can get the real cool layering and coloring of the Grand Canyon in your photos. It really does make a big difference to be out closer to when the sun is rising or setting. Getting out early in this park is a big deal for me because as the day goes on, especially at the South Rim, if you have to catch a shuttle or if you need to get in through the entrance or if you're trying to find parking, it can just get super congested. And so another vote for being out either at sunrise or sunset, because it's just much less busy at those times as well. And you'll have a better experience trying to catch the shuttle. It's common to have to wait for the shuttle for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, especially in the middle of the day. So you will definitely want to keep that in mind. Speaking of the shuttle, this is something that can easily make or break your Grand Canyon vacation because they have 4 different shuttle lines here. Some of them are required, some of them are not. They all take you to different areas of the Grand Canyon Village area on the South Rim. And so learning to navigate these shuttles and really understanding how they work will make a huge difference in your experience on the South Rim. I'll do a quick overview right now, but in my Grand Canyon itinerary on Dirt in My Shoes, I walk you through this extensively so that you know exactly what you need to do while you're there and which stops need which shuttle. So it does make a huge difference. But basically, you've got this purple line, and this purple line comes in from Tucson and takes you to the visitor center. That one is not mandatory. You can just take it from the town if you want to, if you don't want to deal with trying to get parking at the South Rim. The other one that is not mandatory is this blue one, and this blue line really just goes through the whole area and stops at the restaurants and the lodging and a lot of the main parking lots and stuff like that. So that's going to connect you from the visitor center out here to the village area. It stops at the campgrounds, it stops at all those places. And so that's a really good option if you are lodging here at the South Rim. Then you don't need to move your car. You can just take that blue shuttle to get to most places. This red shuttle out here is the one that takes you out to Hermit's Rest. This one is mandatory for most of the year. So if you're visiting during the main peak season, you cannot drive your vehicle out here. You will need to take the shuttle. This shuttle is the one that gives people a lot of problems. And it's one that, it runs efficiently. It's really great. It's just everybody wants to go out there. And so it does get backed up. You do end up having to wait for shuttles for a long time along this route typically. There are ways around that, which I talk about in my Grand Canyon itinerary, but it does get pretty congested over here. And the last shuttle is this orange line here. Part of the shuttle is required if you want to hike the South Kaibab Trail. Then you can catch that here at the visitor center and head out here. And it's this one right here will take you out to the South Kaibab Trailhead. If you want to hike the South Kaibab Trail, you can't park your car there. You have to take this orange shuttle to get out to that trailhead. And they also run a Hiker's Express shuttle that takes you from the visitor center or some of these hotels out here to the South Kaibab Trailhead earlier in the morning. So that's another little sub route of this orange one to get you to the South Kaibab Trailhead. This part over here, you do not have to take. This is all just if you want to. So the part of the orange line that is required is if you want to go to the South Kaibab Trail. And again, I have been visiting the Grand Canyon for years and years and years. I've been navigating this shuttle. I could do it with my eyes closed. It's just something that I know how to do really well. I know the ins and outs of it. And if you want my specific suggestions and which stops for which shuttle and all of that, you'll find that in my Grand Canyon itinerary on dirtmyshoes.com. The last thing that I really feel is important to say as you're preparing to go to the Grand Canyon, as you're packing your stuff and deciding what you need, is that the temperature fluctuations in this park are pretty insane. So you can be on the rim and have it be, typically it will be somewhere 70 to 90 degrees during the main peak season. And so it can still get really hot on the rim. But as you go down further, as you drop down into the canyon, if you're deciding to hike or if you're wanting to go all the way to the bottom and stay at Phantom Ranch, which is a really cool thing, then you will experience just huge temperature fluctuations here. So for example, the last time that I hiked to the bottom of the canyon, we went down the South Kaibab Trail and came up the Bright Angel Trail. So it was South Rim trails that we did. But we went down to Phantom Ranch anyway, it's so cool. Such a cool experience. But it was about 60 degrees at the top. It was in May, the beginning of May when I did this. And it was about 60 degrees at the top, but it was about 95 at the bottom. So those temperature fluctuations, again, are so severe. And that's what gets a lot of people into trouble when they're hiking these trails. If they're wanting to go down to Phantom Ranch, even if you're just wanting to hike down to Cedar Ridge on the South Kaibab Trail or Skeleton Point or somewhere along that trail, you will feel those temperature fluctuations and it can get extremely dangerous. Dehydration is really common in this park, because people just totally underestimate how much water they'll need and how hot it gets down into the canyon. So those are two things that you'll definitely want to keep in mind as you're planning your trip to the Grand Canyon. One last thing that I'll say about that, and it's something I haven't mentioned very much, but you can actually stay at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. There are a couple of campgrounds that you can stay at along the way as you're hiking or at the bottom, but the main place to stay is Phantom Ranch right down there along the Colorado River. You can stay there, but it is extremely, extremely hard to get lodging there. You have to put in for a lottery at the time of this recording 15 months in advance. And again, it is a lottery system, so it's just a random draw of whether or not you might get it. It's extremely competitive. And so if that's something that you want to do, then you will definitely want to read up on that. You'll want to plan well in advance so that you can put in for the lottery and hopefully get what you want. Whew, okay, I think we covered it all. There is obviously still more that I could tell you, but that is a really good overview into planning your trip to the Grand Canyon, making some of those initial decisions so that you can make this trip a reality for you. I have other Grand Canyon videos here on my YouTube channel, so be sure to go watch those if you want even more help planning your trip. Or go to dirtandmyshoes.com. I have a bunch of articles that will walk you through in more detail the things that I talked about today in this video. And if you're just feeling overwhelmed or you want more of my help planning your Grand Canyon trip, then check out my Grand Canyon Itinerary. That's where I walk you through everything hour by hour so that you can just show up and have a great time. But I hope that you're able to get everything you need for your upcoming trip to the Grand Canyon and that you have a great vacation.